American generals unexpectedly rebelled against Donald Trump's plans to start a war with Iran. It is reported that the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, is warning President Trump that a military campaign against Iran could carry significant risks, particularly the possibility of being drawn into a prolonged conflict, and he is directly discouraging Trump from this idea. At the same time, General Dan Kane warned Trump that he had angered many of America's allies for no good reason. According to the general, a shortage of ammunition and missiles as well as a lack of support from allies could pose a major danger to American troops if a confrontation with Iran begins. And as is well known, Britain has already refused Trump the use of its air bases for attacks on Iran. In addition to this, videos from the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford have gone viral online, showing constant sewage leaks on board. As a result, the ship is heading toward Greece for repairs. And I will definitely show these videos in this episode. My name is Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write any comment under this episode. In addition, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pecci News. The link is in the description, and there we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, US generals have spoken out against a military operation against Iran. According to Axios, two sources familiar with the internal discussions say that Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, warned President Trump and senior officials that a military campaign against Iran could carry significant risks, particularly the possibility of getting drawn in. Campaign. At the highest levels of the Trump administration, debates continue about how to resolve the Iranian conflict and what the consequences of each option would be. At the moment, several people in Trump's inner circle are urging caution, although some sources believe that Trump himself is leaning toward a strike. First of all, the question arises as to what success in military action would look like and how risky it would be to attempt it. On the other hand, reaching a nuclear deal would likely mean abandoning some of President Trump's previous red lines, in other words, making concessions. While Trump is discussing whether and how to attack Iran, his envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are urging the president to refrain from further action and give diplomacy a chance. This account of the positions of Trump's senior leadership is based on conversations with insiders who attended high-level meetings or were briefed about them. So, Axios claims that General Kane's position may prove especially influential since he is Donald Trump's chief military advisor and is highly respected by the president. And sources have reported that no one is advocating for an invasion or military action involving ground troops. It is reported that just like during the planning of the operation to capture Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, Trump has authorized a small group of experts to analyze the issues in Iran and to present him with a range of options that he can take at his convenience to maximize leverage and minimize risks. And so, General Kane fully supported the operation in Venezuela but is much more cautious in discussions concerning Iran. Kane insists that if the US gets involved in a major war, it will definitely not be possible to avoid casualties among American soldiers. In addition, there are concerns that the Ayatollah regime in Tehran is ready to carry out terrorist attacks in Europe and even America. And next, there's another quote from Axios. In his role as military advisor to the President, the Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Council, Chairman Kane provides citizens and American leaders making decisions about America's security with a range of military options, as well as secondary considerations, related consequences, and risks. The chairman provides these options confidentially. Well, after such a leak of information, Trump himself wrote on the social network Truth Social that Kane would like to avoid war, but believes that if necessary, this war would supposedly be easily won. Here's the quote. He didn't talk about not getting into a conflict with Iran, or even about the fake limited strikes that I read about. He knows only one thing, how to win. If he's told to do it, he'll lead the group. And this is where the main intrigue lies and the most interesting part is revealed. There is information that in recent days Trump has been listening only to General Keane when it comes to the war against Iran. And as Axios reports, even the commander of US Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, was not invited to the meetings convened by Trump about Iran and has not spoken to the president since the beginning of the crisis in early January. Although, let me remind you, in the event of a war, it is precisely the Central Command led by Cooper that will be involved in this war against Iran. Well, all of this looks even stranger. Interestingly, US Vice President J.D. Vance also expressed concern about possible interference in internal discussions in recent days. They say this topic needs to be kept as closed as possible, so Trump is only talking to Keane. At the same time, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is taking a wait-and-see approach instead of firmly coming out for or against strikes on Iran. Well, maybe that's because Rubio has focused more of his attention and efforts on Venezuela and Cuba. It is now known that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are planning to meet with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi as early as Thursday or Friday in Geneva. And both of them assure Trump that time is on his side and that with each passing day his position will only get stronger. It is reported that Trump is already prepared to launch strikes against Iran, but he gave diplomacy one last chance because he trusted Witkoff and Kushner. And here, Senator Lindsey Graham comes into play, who stated that too many of Trump's advisors were discouraging him from bombing Iran. Graham urged the president to ignore them and continue the strikes, including during a phone conversation they had this past Sunday. Graham fears that over time the momentum will be lost and then Trump will have to settle for a completely unfavorable deal. Another supporter of the strikes is the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and after meeting with Trump. And 10 days ago, by the way, he came out and said that he is increasingly concerned that the US will back down and not carry out the strike after all. And then suddenly, the Washington Post adds to the overall picture. The same person, Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, warned Donald Trump that the Americans might not have enough shells and missiles and that the Allies might not help, because Trump himself turned them against him. Kane allegedly told Trump that American ammunition stocks are significantly depleted due to Washington's constant defense of Israel and support for Ukraine. Next is a quote from the Washington Post. Separately, at meetings in the Pentagon, Kane also expressed concern about the scale of any campaign in Iran, its complexity, and the possibility of US casualties. The general stated that any operation would be even more difficult due to the lack of support from allies. Destroying Iran's missile program would require striking hundreds of targets across the country. These targets may include missile launch sites, many of which are mobile, supply depots, air defense systems, and transportation networks used to move these weapons. If the goal is to overthrow Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as Trump has publicly stated, then the target list expands dramatically to thousands of sites, including command and control centers, security services, and key buildings associated with Khamenei. Such a campaign could last for weeks or months, require far more munitions, and expose American troops to much more intense retaliation. And here, I'll just remind you that the United Kingdom has already refused Trump's request to use its air bases for strikes against Iran. And earlier, that same Trump managed to quarrel both with Britain and with the Europeans, and then suddenly the Wall Street Journal shocked everyone completely. The publication, citing American military sources, claims that the most expensive U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, which was sent to the shores of Iran, is, drowning in sewage. Supposedly, the toilets on board, there are 650 of them, are constantly overflowing, turning the aircraft carrier into a nightmare of stench. The problems are so serious that crew members are forced to stand in line for 40 minutes to use the toilet. And now it has come to the point that, as reported by the Wall Street Journal, because of this everyday problem on the aircraft carrier, the US will likely postpone a strike on Iran. The ship is waiting to enter a Greek port for toilet repairs. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support the work of this YouTube channel financially with your donation or subscription using the links and details in the description of this video or by scanning the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.